Okay, so picking up where I left off. First graders are the best listeners. And then it, slowly diminishes over time. We've got junior high school students um, listening 44% of the time, as opposed to first and second graders who are listening 90% of the time. In high school, it drops to 28%. So clearly, over time, people do lose this ability. If you don't exercise it and work at it, it tends to diminish. And also ironic is we there isn't a class usually devoted to listening, and yet we spend so much of our time doing it. Um, we spend on an average basis 9% of our time writing, 16% reading, 30% speaking, and 45% of the time we're listening. Listening to podcasts, listening to TV, listening to people live, listening to the radio, listening to just the sounds outside. We spend a lot of our day just listening, and yet we don't necessarily focus on it or think of it as a skill that needs to be developed. According to the Harvard Business Review, it's more important than ambition, education, and hard work when choosing people to promote in most businesses. So communication skills, tremendously important. And in terms of communication, more numbers I'm throwing at you, but this is the last time. We get 55% of a message's meaning from the speaker's facial expressions. 55%. 38% is how the person says the message, and 7% is the actual words being spoken. So, that's why, of course, I would tend to say that a live class, face-to-face, is ideal. If you can't do that, then, online classes can be great too. And a video component, I think, is really important. At least, you get to see my face. So much is conveyed beyond just words themselves by our body language, our facial expressions, our emotions, our tone, and we read so much more into it than just the words themselves. There are many reasons why we may not be as good of a listener as we could be. Part of that has to do with the fact that most people don't speak that fast. Most people speak at a rate of 125 to 250 words per minute, and yet our minds can process 1,000 to 3,000 words per minute. So there's this huge gap in between how much we can really listen to, but how quickly people are actually speaking, which does what? It allows for people to wander, daydream, lose focus. So again, more reasons why we need to be active listeners as opposed to just passive listeners accepting whatever is traveling through their eardrum. Another interesting thing about listening is, and it would help, I would think most people when thinking about how to present their ideas, is that images, when you convey images to your audience, just as I was telling you the story about the woman who was the improv performer, those images go into your long-term memory. And words alone only live in your short-term memory. So if you really want a message to stick with your audience, vivid imagery, description, stories, anecdotes, that is what gets through to your audience. That's what they'll hold on to when your speech is done, when the message is done being conveyed. So thinking about those sensory details, as any teacher of writing will also tell you, is incredibly important. Show your listener what you're talking about rather than just telling them what they should think. So it is very important to think about listening and how to become a better speaker. And becoming a better speaker often involves becoming a better listener. There was another study about how to replace the 10 worst listening habits with good habits, but being aware of what those listening habits might be might help you. Sometimes we stop listening because the subject matter may seem uninteresting to us. You don't think it's, maybe the presentation's not that exciting, or the person's voice is kind of monotone, or maybe you're like, why do I have to take math? How is this going to help me with my life? And that's where active listening again takes place. You have to use your own creativity and ingenuity to find a way to connect sometimes with a subject or a person that you don't think is interesting enough to you. You sometimes have to get very creative. How can I make math more interesting? How can I find this person who, sounds like they're going to fall asleep up there? How can I engage more with it? Maybe I can, construct a little story in my mind and try to think of, who are they and where did they come from and why are they like this? You can start to ask questions in your mind while you're listening in order to keep yourself stimulated. Find a stronger motivation to listen. Why, taking math could help you manage your budget at home better, or, sometimes it's within you to decide how you're going to make it more worthwhile. We can also tend to focus on the delivery and appearance of a person, focusing on those details like the shape of their glasses or their hair color, or focusing on those details could be a distraction. So to train your mind to listen to the content and not get swayed by the outer appearance, it takes effort. It takes conscious effort. But if you can steer yourself back to the content of what somebody's saying and try to ignore the outward appearances, again, you'll be able to focus better and think about and be a better listener. Sometimes we can become too stimulated. Somebody may say something, have an opinion, and we get a reaction, and immediately we start thinking of how we're going to respond to what they're saying. Before you start thinking of counter arguments to what a person is saying, try to at least hear them out. You may be surprised by what they say, because once you start thinking of your counter arguments, you're probably tuning out to anything that they are saying. If you listen only for facts, another way you might become distracted from listening. I might hear somebody, say a word incorrectly, or, recite some statistic that I know is incorrect. And then I've gone. My mind is focused now on the fact, well, they got that fact wrong, so I'm not going to listen to anything else they have to say. Again, if you want to be a good listener, you have to be willing to, see the bigger picture. Try to look for the gist, for the main idea of what they're saying. And unless they have, an abundant, copious amount of errors, try to forgive the little slip here and there and get to the main idea of what they're talking about. Fake attention. Sometimes, you might find yourself, nodding your head and saying, oh, yes, mm-hmm, and you're not really listening. And this is kind of a double-edged sword. I have to be the first to admit that sometimes I do this. I'll be like so used to, trying to exhibit good listening skills that I'll be nodding my head and the person's like, wow, she's really listening to me, and I haven't been. So you have to be honest with yourself and make sure that, if you really are saying, yes, oh, that you actually mean that. And yet, this is a little trick I found. Sometimes making myself nod my head and listen and say, mm-hmm, actually can help to focus my mind if I am starting to stray. So it's just, it takes some awareness and knowledge of yourself to know. But I find it helps because I physically become more involved looking at the person and making sure that I'm not distracted by the birds in the trees or, the TV that's on. So making myself look, nodding my head, responding somehow with questions, paraphrasing what they're saying, even if I'm not even necessarily that interested, but doing anything that I can to show that I am listening. Sometimes that can motivate me and actually make me listen more. It may start out as fake listening, but I actually become more engaged because I'm making myself try to be more attentive to them. So just another little trick. If you can remove distractions, of course, great. The phone is one of the biggest ones. If you can put your phone away, if you can put it on vibrate, I find that even just flipping my phone over so I don't see it is incredibly important. They say that conversations at dinner tables, they've studied, the content of what people talk about, and when the phone is out on the table, People tend to have more shallow conversations, and they psychologists think it's because our mind is distracted by oh, who could be calling right now? Oh, I wonder who that is. And we start to lose focus on the person that we are with at the moment. So whatever you can do to remove those distractions is great. Putting your phone away, turning the music off, shutting a door, whatever you need to do. Put the dogs in the other room. Whatever is distracting you, try to remove it if it is getting in the way of you listening to someone. It could even be physical things like you're hungry or you're thirsty or you need more sleep. So do what you can to be physically and emotionally and psychologically ready to listen better. Taking care of those needs is important. It's also, there is a tendency many people have to avoid things that are difficult and take the easier path. Becoming a good listener is not necessarily easy. It's a discipline. It takes effort to become better at it. And the easy way out is, fake listening, not really caring, not really finding a motivation, not really if a person is, talking about a complex subject, giving up before we really ask questions. So if you want to be a better listener, it is hard. It takes effort, but the more you do it, just like any ability, the easier it gets. If you want to make a conscious effort to be a better listener, if you bring your attention and focus to that, you will. You'll get better. And finally, just a last couple of tips to become a better listener is anticipating. If you do find your mind wandering and you're not sure, how you can stay focused on someone, try to think of where they're going with what they're saying and not necessarily speak for them, but try to anticipate. It's like reading a good book, a mystery. Try to put yourself in the shoes of the author and see what direction they might be going. You can do that, when someone is talking to you as well. Listening for what kind of support they're using.